There have been many reports of medical practitioners abusing their patients over the years. Some do it to make money, while others do it for the thrill of the kill. Numerous infamous doctors are known for using their authority to commit murder. These are the 10 evilest medical professionals to ever walk the globe. 10. Walter Freeman. One of the most perverse medical professionals ever was and is Walter Freeman. The doctor gained expertise doing lobotomies, a technique in which the connections in the prefrontal cortex of the brain are cut. This is intended to treat persons with mental illnesses and lessen anxiety and suffering. Despite reports of this procedure's success, the majority of patients experienced cognitive and behavioral issues and never fully recovered. Freeman performed lobotomies all around the country while perfecting his unique method, the transorbital lobotomy. To do this, the connections to the prefrontal brain have to be severed by driving an ice pick into the corner of the eye. Over the course of 4 decades, he is thought to have done more than 4,000 lobotomies, with more than 100 of his patients passing away and hundreds more living with physical and mental problems as a result. Helen Mortensen underwent his last operation, but she passed away during her 3rd lobotomy. Freeman was forbidden from conducting the procedure once again and spent the rest of his life in California running his own business. 9. Karl Klauberg. German doctor Karl Klauberg tortured and experimented on detainees at the Auschwitz death camp. He informed Heinrich Himmler that he was eager in learning how to sterilize women, and Himmler then assigned him to Auschwitz. Klauberg set up shop in Block 10 of the camp, looking for a quick and inexpensive way to sterilize women. His trials frequently used dreadful techniques like putting acid and formaldehyde into a woman's uterus. The ovaries of many women were injured, so they were removed and transported to Berlin for additional testing. Some even passed away, while others experienced persistent health problems. Over 700 women are thought to have participated in Klauberg's experiments when he was at Auschwitz. Eventually, in 1945, Russian forces managed to capture him. Amazingly, he was freed from prison in 1955 after being given a 25-year term in 1948. He tried to start over by returning to Germany, but the public's outrage led to his imprisonment for his crimes. He passed away while facing charges. 8. Joseph Mengele. Mengele, an anthropologist, joined the Nazi Party in 1937 and rose through the ranks fast. He finally found himself stationed at Auschwitz and allowed free rein to experiment because to his obsession with human genetics. On the POWs there, he carried out gruesome operations. Twins piqued Mengele's curiosity in particular. He had a reputation for injecting chemicals into prisoners' eyes in an effort to alter their color. The limbs were severed by Mengele without any anesthetic. Additionally, he joined 2 twins who later perished from gangrene. The patients would be sent to the gas chamber after his experiments were complete. Despite being apprehended, he was released because he was able to conceal his true identity. Mengele escaped from Europe to South America out of fear of being apprehended once more and given the death penalty. He managed to avoid capture for 30 years before passing away in 1979 at the age of 67 from drowning brought on by a stroke. 7. Marcel Petit. Petit preyed on the Jewish population while living in Nazi-occupied Paris by offering them safe passage out of France in exchange for money. Petit would instruct his victims to receive a vaccination before fleeing, saying that this was necessary. He would give them cyanide injections before disposing of their bodies in the Seine. Later, Petit would relocate his operations to his house, where he would execute his victims and dispose of their corpses in a fire. When the house started to smell bad, the police went to investigate and discovered human remains in his basement. Despite being suspected of having killed more than 60 people, Petit was found guilty of 26 murders and executed as punishment. 6. Harold Shipman. Harold Shipman was given a life sentence for killing 15 patients who were in his care, and it's estimated that he killed at least 250 people overall. The only doctor in Great Britain to have been found guilty of killing his patients, most of them were elderly women, is known as Dr. Death. In Hyde, close to Manchester, Shipman operated an extremely successful clinic and surgery. The Brook surgery in Hyde's Linda Reynolds became suspicious of his practices. She realized that many of his patients died. A cab driver who would transport elderly customers to meet Shipman admitted to authorities that he didn't believe Shipman was being honest with them. After viewing Dr. Death, he was baffled as to how so many otherwise healthy people could suddenly pass away. Police looked into the matter but found no proof. Shipman wasn't discovered until he had claimed Kathleen Grundy as his final victim. She had amended her will to leave everything to Shipman. This time, the cops delved a little deeper and detained Shipman for her demise. They also linked him to 15 further homicides. After receiving 15 life sentences, Shipman was never heard talking about the murders and kept his crimes a secret until he committed suicide in prison the day before his 58th birthday. 5. Thomas Cream. Thomas Cream, also known as the Lambeth Poisoner, murdered numerous people in 3 distinct nations. The Scottish-Canadian doctor's murderous rampage started in Ontario after he was charged with the death of a pregnant patient in his office. Cream was not charged despite all the evidence clearly showing him to be the guilty party. He then relocated to Chicago and started a new clinic, but after several of his patients unexpectedly passed away, he soon came to be suspected. He was detained and charged this time. He received a life sentence, but Governor Joseph W. 5, who had been bought off by Cream's brother, postponed it. Cream ran away to London and resumed his homicidal spree there, killing 5 sex workers before being apprehended. In November 1892, he was put to death. His final words were a confession that he was Jack the Ripper, although this has been refuted because he was in custody when those killings took place. 4. Michael Swongo. While attending the medical school at Southern Illinois University, Michael Swongo developed an interest with death. He graduated and accepted an internship at the Ohio State University Medical Center despite almost getting expelled. Swongo developed a taste for murder during his time on the ward, where numerous nurses confided in their supervisors that Swongo frequently caused the deaths of healthy patients. Although these claims were refuted, Swongo was discreetly instructed to move on. After accepting a job at Quincy University, he quickly learned that he had been found guilty of aggravated violence for poisoning co-workers. It was discovered that Swongo intentionally poisoned his co-workers by injecting arsenic into their food. Before being released, he served 5 years in prison. When he was released from prison, he legally changed his name to Daniel J. Adams and fabricated documents claiming to be a doctor. He then performed shady acts at other clinics and hospitals across America before being finally apprehended in 1997. Swongo admitted guilt to 3 murders, but the FBI thinks he's really responsible for much more than that. He is currently incarcerated for life. 3. Shiro Ishii. Ishii, a doctor and scientist, had a fervent interest in chemical weapons and was a staunch nationalist. He would conduct a variety of gruesome experiments on Chinese POWs and civilians while in charge. On their subjects, they would inflict lethal sickness and exhausting chemical weapons. Additionally, they performed surgery on real patients, pushed women to become pregnant, inflicted strokes and heart attacks, and infected living individuals with plagued rats to observe the effects. It is said that they also attempted to treat patients by using frostbite. Ishii was saved even though he should have spent the remainder of his human life rotting in a cell. He consented to hand up his study papers to the American government in exchange for immunity. The villainous Dr. Shiro Ishii would live out the remainder of his days in obscurity in Japan before being fatally affected by throat cancer at the age of 67. 2. H. Holmes. This American physician was a medical student who briefly worked as a physician in Pennsylvania. He also operated a side business where he dug up dead people and sold them for cash. He also worked in a drugstore there, where a young patient died after ingesting the incorrect medication that he had prescribed. Herman Webster Mudgett escaped to Chicago and used the name H. Holmes because he didn't want to face the repercussions. Here, Holmes constructed a 3-story house with a pharmacy that was part of it. Holmes is alleged to have killed scores of individuals in this location. The media referred to it as the Murder Castle. According to reports, Holmes lured his victims into the house's concealed torture chambers before killing them. Because of this, he was dubbed America's first serial killer. Holmes discovered the bodies, but he was able to elude capture. He was ultimately detained in Boston on suspicion of killing his former business partner and given a hanging verdict. He admitted to an additional 27 murders after his conviction, but the authorities found it difficult to believe him. He claimed to have killed many people, yet many of them were still alive. Holmes, who was 34 years old, was hanged in 1896. 1. Morris Bolber. Morris Bolber was a horrible character who was referred to as the mob doctor because of his connections to the criminal underworld. He was a member of the Philadelphia Poison Ring and a Russian Jew immigrant. In the 1930s, this was a mob-related organization that committed numerous crimes. Bolber was hired to administer shots to unwitting victims in an effort to protect them. Instead, they were murdered and given arsenic. The life insurance policies that the group forced each victim to sign would subsequently be collected. Bolber, who later turned state's evidence after being captured in 1939, is thought to have killed 30 to 50 individuals. Bolber was given a life term in jail for his involvement in the killings. Due to his assistance with the investigation, he avoided the electric chair and passed away in custody in 1954.